What's up, y'all, and welcome back to the Black Health Podcast. My name is Marcilla.
I'm Khadijah.
I'm Paula.
Hey, y'all, I'm Matthew.
And today we are back with our first podcast of the new year. Getting a little late start, but it's okay because the whole squad is
Let's get
together again. Welcome back, Paula.
Thank you.
So, we have to always get started with an icebreaker. So, since this is our first podcast of the new year, I want to ask you all, what are your guiding themes or theme for this year? And let's start with Paula.
Okay. You saw I was ready, so.
Yes.
But, so yeah, like lately, we were talking about this, Mercy. Lately, I've been thinking about, like, just when I have situations with people or whatever, and it's like giving me a bad feeling or giving me the ick or whatever it is, like, I'm learning to, like, trust my gut and to not, like, convince myself that I'm wrong for not liking something and just being like, how I feel is how I feel. That's my theme for 2023. It's like, I believe in myself and I trust myself. And so if something doesn't feel right to me, I'm gonna just go with that. I'm gonna lean into that actually. And not, try to like talk myself out of anything, because every time I've done that, that's how I end up in worse and worse situations. So I'm just cut it short. So
you be knowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it work the opposite way too, with things that you like and trusting that you like those things?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So things that I really like, I'm gonna be like, I'm also gonna lean into that. So just like, like how I feel, I'm gonna like honor that, like kind of in the first feeling. I'm not gonna stick around trying to convince myself or figure out more or whatever. It just is what it is. Like, I am 31. I be forgetting.
Sure?
I be forgetting. But yeah, I'm going into 32 this year, and I just feel like after 30 plus years of experience with life, like I know what works for me and what doesn't. So yeah,
that's real. Shout out to the clarity like that comes in your 30s.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus that Black woman intuition.
Never failed me.
Never. She ain't never wrong.
How about you, Marcilla?
So I think my theme has been like purpose. So I feel like this year, we're growing as an organization with pretty much all of us full time now. So, if y'all didn't know, we all full time now.
Yep.
So just that, and like, okay, now, like, what does that mean now? Like, now that we have that capacity, and just in general, just other parts of my life, like just finding the purpose and the meaning in all of it and walking in that.
Yeah, I like that. Walking in your purpose.
I like that.
I don't know. It feels nice. It's cool. A little scary, but I like it.
Yeah, I remember when you were taking the jump into full time, you had a lot of nerves around that.
Yes.
But glad you're feeling a bit more settled in it. I don't know if you are, but it seems like you are.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm figuring out a routine, things that work.
Yeah. I love it. I feel like this is how life should be.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like after I got the initial panic of like, oh my God, I'm not up and working at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, because I don't have to.
Yeah, I did kind of experience that too. Like, what am I supposed to be doing right now?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Like, oh my God.
And then kind of like that stress that you get, like, oh, there's a boss I got to respond to. So like, you kind of used to like having nerves, like, oh, somebody might hit me up on Teams, stuff like that. Like those little triggers.
That ping, like,
yeah, but I'd be like, no, it's cool. Like, I like when my colleagues hit me up now.
Right.
Because like,
y'all. Oh, yeah, it's y'all. Like, I'm just really having a conversation. And then I feel like we talk about like work, and then we talk about other stuff, and then we transition back into work. So it's just like, what are we doing? Oh, yeah. I can get with meetings like this. What about you, Matthew?
It's discipline, like it is every year.
Yes.
I don't know. I think I try not to like subscribe to the like elevation. I'm always trying to get better type thing. But I think for me, it's like refinement. Like I just want to get the things that I'm good at. I want to get better at them. I don't necessarily need to like add on new skills or always trying to like expand myself. But the things that are important to me, I want to be there for them. I want to show up for them. Just be better.
Refinement. I like that. Becoming a master at what you're already good at.
I like that. Mastery.
You like master?
That sounded a little strange.
It did. It's
but
okay.
It's okay.
I do like the framing of like refinement, honestly, more. Well, refinement as like discipline, because I feel like with discipline that can get very caught up in like capitalism and
Sure.
like just like it
It's
could
like
be, it
trying
can
to
turn
make-
negative very
Yeah.
fast, like a rat
Culture.
race. So, but I do like kind of that refinement and getting, just improving.
Yeah. Trying to be a
what
better
you-
runner, better person, better coworker, all of those things.
Oh, you go, Matthew.
Thank you. How about you, Khadijah?
I would say kindness to myself
Okay.
and grace to myself and others. So mine, I feel like for me, if I set a goal like discipline, that would like put like too much pressure on myself. So I feel like for me, like setting the opposite, I'm not sure if like that's not the opposite,
yeah.
but just something that just taking pressure off myself.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I can get very caught up in like perfectionism and like constantly feeling like I'm not doing enough, or like I can be doing more. So I feel like just being kind to myself.
Yes.
Well,
That's important.
You gotta give yourself grace.
Would you describe yourself as like a type A personality?
I sometimes, yes. Yeah. I think for like the like professional, like academic side of myself, I can very much be that, but I'm trying to fight against that because I really don't. I don't like that because I do feel like that's kind of caught up in like capitalism and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Hustle culture. Yeah.
That's good. That's important. I'm glad to hear that grace and kindness to yourself is top of the list. I think it's important for everybody to really forgive themselves. But it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. So.
For sure. But can't worry about the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. What ifs, maybes. We all just here.
For sure.
So, Paula, I know you have a great discussion you wanted to lead today.
Yeah, so this topic is really interesting. Basically, I saw a tweet online that was about how there's been like a rise in cancers in young people. And it was just like a whole thread. The guy, like his Twitter handle is Nate Bear or Nate B_panic. And so he had this whole thread about cancers being on the rise and just some other different stuff, some articles that were linked in the thread. And I just wanted to like kind of go through that because when I sent it to the group, just kind of like, oh, this is interesting. Y'all should read this thread. And then obviously it relates to like some of the work that we're doing. So I sent it to the group and then Mercy was like, oh, we should talk about this on our next podcast. And I was like, oh yeah, we should. Like, that's a great idea. So it's a lot. Like, I think it's a lot like to get into with it, like a lot of different perspectives we can add to it. So just to kind of like go into a little bit of like what the Twitter thread was about and then the articles as well. There's 2 articles that I found some like just interesting little things I want to talk through. So basically like the first study, it was a study from Brigham and Women's Hospital. And it was basically like a very long, I forgot the years, but it was a long study that they did with like a lot of different data points, different people's data that showed that cancer is on the rise amongst people younger than age 50. So kind of like younger people. And on top of that, what they saw too was that the risk for a new cancer diagnosis is increasing with each like successive generation. So basically, like if you were born in 1960, you have a higher risk of getting cancer under the age of 50 than someone who was born in 1950. Sorry, yeah, I said 60. So yeah, but it's like that for like every like decade, basically. And so the study also talked a bit about like kind of like why that might be. And they were hypothesizing that it's like related to like lifestyle factors, like we often hear about and know. and like Western like lifestyle, diet, and culture. And things like smoking, alcohol consumption, like those things have kind of been on the rise too, since like the data that they started with. So I think they were kind of looking at like the 1950s to like 2015 or something. And so just obviously since like the 50s, like a lot of these like sedentary lifestyles, like that kind of stuff has been on the rise. It's more common. Oh, and they were also they found some data that showed that like this like rise has been you saw it really steeply start happening in the 90s. And since then, each new decade has a higher risk of being diagnosed with cancer at a young age. So yeah, so I wanted to like talk about that a little bit. So like the part about like the lifestyle factors, I think that for me, when I was reading it, I was kind of like, I think we can go a little deeper than this. Like it just being about smoking and people not eating healthy. Of course, they said obesity. Should I keep going? Okay. so like, of course, they said obesity, alcohol consumption, all that kind of smoking. I think I said that already, but yeah, but like individual behaviors basically. So, and then they were saying like other like comorbidities, like type 2 diabetes, is something that's related to a higher risk of cancer as well. And that's also been on the rise. But yeah, so like I said, I think there's a reason that those things are on the rise, as well. So talking a bit more about like higher level reasons for that. And then the next study or article that the guy whose tweet I initially saw his thread that was linked, that was also like super interesting. It says something very similar, but it was basically the stat was that the researchers from Penn State, they found a 30% increase in cancer diagnoses for people aged 15 to 39. And the time period that they were looking at for that 30% increase was between 1973 and 2015. So yeah, and so then this article talks about how being diagnosed with cancer at a younger age brings up like kind of specific issues that are different than like when an older person is diagnosed with cancer versus a younger person. Because when between 15 to 39, like that's the age group that we're in. Right. And so that's when you have career changes, like you're starting your career, you're doing a lot of like different things in life to kind of like help build yourself and establish yourself. And so to get a cancer diagnosis somewhere in that time period really can change the trajectory of your life. So like financial stability. And we know that like medical debt is like one of the biggest reasons people go into poverty, actually. Yep. And so, if you get a very serious diagnosis like this, that's affecting your whole like wealth building and income opportunities. You might not be able to work, for a long time, things like that. So it's quite interesting, like to get diagnosed like this at a very pivotal point in your life. Yeah. And then the other thing too is like, a lot of young people don't have health insurance, so like that's also contributing to like why you could be more likely to get into debt. And it just like totally derailing your financial stability and economic stability, which is a social determinant of health. And then as well, when you're younger people are more likely to survive cancer, but then they have obviously an increased risk of like those long-term effects because they have more kind of like of their life left. Yeah. So it's things like more likely to get heart disease. And then I also found this one interesting, like then you have this increased potential like fertility issues. Yeah. And I could talk about like a personal, like kind of like someone in my family who similar, like, yeah. And then like getting cancer like later in life, obviously your risk for that increases. So yeah. So I thought this was interesting too. And I was thinking about how like I have a very huge family, as y'all know, and I always talk about. And so whenever we talk about issues with Black people, it's always somebody in my family who is dealing with it. And like a lot of times multiple people, because it's like, yeah, I'm every Black person. Like y'all all related to me, basically. Right. Yeah. Like so yeah, like I have a cousin who's in their 30s and just got like diagnosed with cancer, dealing with like cancer. And then, it's like so much like these things, I'm like, oh, I'm really like seeing this happening, like play out in real life for Black folks. Oh, and then the other thing about this second study that I wanted to mention real quick was that the study included 500,000 people. 80% of the participants were white.
Oh,
and so, yeah, so like they were kind of talking about, like the article I was reading was talking about how like that is pointing to how Black people do not, or people of color, non-white people, do not have access to health insurance, and then are not getting, that's why they're not linked into like this research. But then that is also a huge issue, like more broadly for the topic that we're talking about, because that's showing like obviously cancer is on the rise for those people as well, but now they're not getting diagnosed probably, or they're getting diagnosed at much later stages, which we know happens. So yeah, so I said all that to just say like, that's kind of the topic for today. And then particularly like kind of dissecting like, what does this mean for Black people, like, so this is research. This is actually globally. It's showing like these cancers are on the rise for younger folks. But I think, what we always try to do is have a perspective where we talk about what it means for our specific communities that we belong to. And so, yeah, so I kind of want to start off and just kind of pose a question to Matthew, as really like our front man and our lead for our Good Down There colorectal cancer program. So we have this program. It's a partnership with Cottonelle. It's called Good Down There. And what it aims to do is to increase the number of Black Americans who get screened for colorectal cancer, and to just provide like education and resources around the disparities. And so I wanted to ask Matthew, just kind of like with that whole subject, cancers being on the rise in younger folks, like what stands out to you, like in relation to like your experiences, like really like working hands on with this program, like some of the things that you've observed over the last, years that we've been doing this?
Yeah, I think a lot that I've seen, a lot that I've observed from working with communities. But I think before I get there, I would love to touch on, we talked about sort of the increase over time. And I've, been thinking a lot more about marketing and how marketing has an impact on behaviors, right? We talked about an increase of smoking, increase of alcohol consumption. I think there's one side where people are going to vices due to stress. But I think, it's been shown in evidence that advertisers are marketing in our communities these cigarettes, alcohol, and like low grade alcohol as well. And I think that has a direct impact on consumption. And I think we have to really think about and hold advertisers, companies accountable on how they market to our people, given the impacts that we know these products have. So I just wanted to touch on that before going into the Good Down There program, and see if there are any additional thoughts on advertising and the role that has on our health.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing Newport ads like in Black magazines, and they always look cool. Like I was like, damn, I kind of want to smoke a Newport. Like, and like even like the Hennessy ads, like I remember like this one's like he coming to the door with Hennessy, and like a great night starts with Hennessy, and I'm like, okay, so it is. And then even like when you're in the neighborhoods, like you can always tell when you're in a Black neighborhood, right? Because there's just certain marketing that you see that you don't see when you go to Brookhaven,
right?
Or you over by Emory's campus. So I definitely think it's not even subtle.
Yeah.
So
and Brookhaven and Emory are neighborhoods, white affluent neighborhoods in our city. For those who may not know,
absolutely.
But yeah, I think that's really interesting. Individual behaviors live within the context of our environments, and it's really important to always point that out. But yeah, as far as the Good Down There campaign, what I've seen really falls into two categories. One is like cancer prevention, and then two is early detection. Right. And so when we think about cancer prevention, we're talking about all those things you mentioned earlier, those social determinants of health. And it's actually funny. I was at an event. I say an event. I was at the White House.
Stop downplaying it, please.
As soon as you said event, I was like, this man better not be talking about being at the White House.
I'm
trying to do better. My uncle hit me up. He was like, why am I just finding out about this 2 hours before you about to be at the White House?
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, man. But yeah, I need to.
Too humble, McCurdy.
I apologize. But so was at the White House. People were talking about sort of the determinants of health. And this woman, she was talking about food behaviors and eating behaviors. And just saying, people choosing high fat content foods, processed foods. We need to work on teaching people how to eat healthier. And I was just like, that's just so ignorant to me, right? Like, again, our behaviors exist within the context of our environments. Right. And so when we talk about cancer prevention, yes, there are correlations between your diet and developing cancer, but we know that Black people tend to live in food deserts, and I've been trying to use actually the term food swamps a little bit more. So places where there's highly concentrated areas of unhealthy food, right? And so you have your fast foods, you have your corner stores, and a lack of access to produce, liquor stores included. And those are areas where we're seeing higher rates of cancer as well. And so it's not that I just like to eat unhealthy. It's like that's what's in my community. That's what's easy for me. And so we are seeing those correlations as well. I think about other determinants like poverty. Like I think about our organization in DC that we work with, So Others Might Eat, and they're dealing with an unhoused population. And so folks who are sort of transient, not being able to always have access to social services, to screening. And we know that poverty is also a leading indicator for someone having a cancer diagnosis. And so when we want to think about the context in which people live in their neighborhoods, the quality of their neighborhoods as it relates to our cancer outcomes. And so when we want to think about prevention, the framing that I like, that I've been reading about, is all health for all people. And so if we're thinking about food access, housing as the social determinants of health, we need to think about them as health care as well. And so we need to be providing food, we need to be providing housing for people. And so I really like that frame. It's actually in this book called Health Communism that I'm reading that I recommend, about how we think about healthcare and health delivery. And then we have, when we think again about exposures, that direct exposure. I know Mercy's going to talk about this a little later, but when we think about toxins in our environment, our proximity to chemical plants and things like that, removing people from those situations would be a great way for cancer prevention. And then that second bucket that I think is really important is screening and early detection. And so we know that if we can find a polyp before it turns cancerous, we can remove the polyp and essentially stop someone from developing colorectal cancer. So just a lot of people don't know that. Which has been really surprising to see as we go out and talk to people. They don't know when they should be screened. And right now the screening age is 45 for people who are at normal risk. I would say that Black people should no longer consider themselves normal risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
We see higher rates in our communities. And so, we at younger ages. So we kind of don't listen to those guidelines. And so like we'll give and distribute, a stool-based screening test. I think to folks who allow folks to assess their own risk, right? Like, do you think you need this? Is there a history in your family? Have you noticed a change? And we'll allow people to take that stool-based test home with them if they want to. And I think that's really key, is giving that knowledge, but also giving them people the tools to then screen themselves. And I think lastly, when we think about early detection, we really want to think about access to quality healthcare. Right? And people sometimes separate those two. But I think access and quality really have to go together.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. And so when we think about Trap Medicine, our organization in LA, our partner in LA, they're really thinking about access to information, providing community-based settings for people to get services. And so, they go to barbershops and other places and distribute the health information. But we know that having access to healthcare provider is really important. We know that our communities, they're closing down. They're not there. We just don't even have the proximity to those. And so that I think that in a sense is also having us have a higher incidence of cancer and seeing it in younger people as well. And then to also talk about here in Georgia, I know Wellstar's been getting a bad rap lately because they closed down Atlanta Medical Center, and they deserve it. But I think they've also done a great job in our rural communities. When we think about one, folks not trusting healthcare systems, they've developed a lot of key rural partners that they can go to, they can distribute, and they'll put the WellStar name on it. But I think going to people, being in communities is really important. And we know that in Georgia, and Black communities in LA, Houston, Detroit, Philadelphia, where a lot of our community partners are, we're seeing a lack of access and a lack of information, and our program is really designed to meet those needs.
Yeah, you see it in how like surprised and excited people are and like just get the screening kit. Like
y'all giving this away? It's free.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay for this. It's like, no, take it, please.
Like, we care about you.
Right.
Yeah. We're not charging you for this.
Yeah.
People will be surprised at the resource, but also the information. Like, oh, I didn't know that I should be in screening. Oh, I know I was supposed to get a colonoscopy. And that's actually the funny thing too. We'll be there talking about colorectal cancer, and people will be like, oh, it's time for me to get my colonoscopy. Like, I've been putting it off. I know I should do it. And then we're also able to promote our fund to have people get their colonoscopies paid off or paid for. And so it's really interesting to see. Colorectal cancer is sort of within, it's probably, I think it's the leading cancer deaths up there. I think it is number one. And so, one or two. But the information has to get out there. And I think our program has done a really good job of giving both quality information, but also a resource.
Yeah. I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, just about how like people are framing like, people need to eat healthier, like Black community is, what was the plate debacle? Like,
low vibrational plates.
Low vibrational plates. Yes, exactly.
That's
so
hilarious.
all of that conversation and stuff, like, and just like that, like belief system or just like sentiment in our communities, a lot of times coming from like our leaders, people who are on panels at the White House are saying things like this. And so I just really want to urge like other Black people with any kind of position, a soapbox you standing on, anything, like when you are addressing like our communities about this, like let's reframe that to how do we get access to healthier foods and better foods for us. Like, and I just think just changing, because obviously, yes, eating things that are good for you are not full of processed fats and sugars and all of those things. Like, we're not like necessarily like trying to debate like that science, that like there are foods that make you more at risk for certain negative health outcomes. The issue is how we're framing the solution. Like the solution is not you need to stop eating that. We really need to be talking more about the bigger problem, the problem that's going to have the biggest impact for the most people if it's solved, which is that how do we make sure fresh foods are readily available in our neighborhoods and easy to get to, and there are systems in place, support services in place that people can prepare healthy and fresh meals that are good for them and their family and taste good and respond to, aligned with their cultural traditions and beliefs around food as well. There's lots of like really healthy soul food dishes. Like, so we need to stop framing soul food as like it's being bad. It's inherently bad. Like
collard greens are some of the healthiest greens you can eat. They're packed full of vitamins.
Exactly. So
but that's all just racism, man. I think the idea of like who deserves to have healthy food in their communities, and the stereotype that Black people don't want to eat healthy also allows them to decide, or to say, they don't actually want these in their neighborhood, right? Because they're not going to eat them. They rather have unhealthy foods. And that's just, that's something we have to break. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. No, I was just going to add on to that. And it's like, and then like even part of that is healthy foods are usually way more expensive. So if you're putting these expensive places in communities where the average income for a household of 4 is $32,000, and then you got this place that's selling $17 salads, and they trying to feed their whole family. If they can take $20, you can take $10 and go to Wendy's, get you burgers, fries, nuggets for everybody.
Some spicy nuggets.
Listen, that 4 for $4 saved me many a nights in college.
Delicious.
Okay. 5 4 for $4.
So it's like now not everybody got food.
Yeah.
Versus, okay, y'all, we got this one salad. Like, let's be realistic. Like, people gonna make their money stretch.
Yep.
So we have to also make things in part of access is affordability.
Exactly.
And so I have seen Gooder. It's this company that's based out of Atlanta, I believe.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they set up like a new mobile grocery store that goes into communities and groceries are free and like had a whole bunch of stuff. So I thought that was cool. So programs like that are awesome.
Yep.
But like, I mean, that's the only one I know of for real.
Yeah, and it shouldn't take private industry to solve our problems.
Exactly.
Right? Like, this is a function of, again, social well-being that should be paid for.
And kind of off topic, but a little on topic, and maybe like a little hotep-ish. But
I love all the caveats. I want to hear this now.
So I was like reading on the internet, and they were just talking about how, like, in America, have you noticed, like, there are no trees that just like grow fruit that are just like easily like on the street, like when you go to like other like Caribbean countries or things like that, and it's just like, oh, you can just pull a mango off a tree or something. But they said like, and then on top of that, how like the pollen gets worse and worse every year. And it's because they are planting more male trees instead of the female trees because they don't want the fruit bearing trees to provide people with free food because they want you to pay for the food.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they don't want to clean it off the streets.
They don't want to clean it off the streets. So they'd rather fuck up everybody with these seasonal allergies. Now we got to go to Big Pharma and get all these allergy meds. But can't get no fresh fruit. I'm just saying.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
I'm
following. Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's very interesting.
Don't give the hoteps credit for that.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, I had to throw it in there. I didn't think it was hotepy, but you know, sometimes y'all be telling me I be hotepy, so I just had to put that in there.
When you start off with I read on the internet,
I mean, that's what I'm saying. You just never know where it's gonna go. But I thought it made sense.
Yeah, but I know, you know, we have been touching on some of these like cancer valleys and cancer areas. So interested to hear your thoughts on how those developed, why they developed, and how it
racism. No, yeah. But yes, not really playing. Yeah, so I think that is, you know, again, people like to try to point to individual behaviors, but really we have to think of our lived environments. And so a couple of like, they call them hot spots or cancer clusters, but two prominent ones are the Cancer Belt, that's like pretty much in like Houston, Texas, and then Cancer Alley, or the Cancer Belt that is in Louisiana, which is a stretch along the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And basically, and they're like all around the South. They're kind of in the Midwest as well. You'll see them, but it basically is just all of these industrial facilities that have set up in these communities and are emitting all this hazardous air pollution, which ironically, not by mistake or coincidence, are in Black and poor communities.
No.
Shock. Yes. Right? So shocking. So yeah, the EPA has identified more than 1,000 of these hotspots in the U.S., some of which are also in Port Arthur, Texas, Laurel, Mississippi, Anniston, Alabama, which is right outside of Birmingham, and even out here in Gainesville, Georgia. Right.
Really?
And so the EPA defines hotspots as areas where the additional cancer risk is greater than 1 in 100,000. So that means that of 100,000 people living in the area, there's going to be one additional case of cancer per lifetime. So in these areas that are in Houston and Louisiana, the highest risk is 1 in 210.
Jeez.
That's wild.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's very high.
And they're like all different types of cancer: lung cancer, skin cancers,
Wow.
throat cancers. Because obviously you're inhaling this stuff, so it's all of your upper respiratory tract and the things you come in contact with in your skin, because at this point it's in the air, it's in the soil, it's in the water. And so a lot of these communities, people have been there for generations. Like especially like in Louisiana and like Mississippi, like a lot of the people who live there, like those used to be like plantations that they actually bought from like their owners. And so like literally generations. So it's like, and now because of the quality, even if they wanted to move, they can't sell it because no one wants to buy it. So they're kind of like stuck in these neighborhoods. So there's no way for them to get around. A lot of them are employed by the factories that are emitting all of these hazardous chemicals. And this, so a lot of community advocates, are advocating for like the closure of these facilities because they're like, yo, you see people all the time like this person got diagnosed with cancer. This person died of cancer. Like, so many people who die from cancer or have other issues. And so advocating for these, but of course, corporations are just like, a literal quote from one. It says, "It is believed that the social and economic benefits of the facility outweigh the environmental impacts."
Okay.
So we don't care if you guys are getting cancer.
Literally.
Exactly.
And like, how are you making that calculation?
How? Like, you're trying to say that it's not related to your plant, but if y'all could see this map, we'll post it in the notes. But there, you'll see like a cluster of where all these facilities are, and in that radius of that cluster is where there's a wild increased risk of developing some form of cancer in your lifetime. And it's like, you can't tell me that's a coincidence, that has nothing to do with what y'all are emitting out into the environment. And they just don't care. They keep trying to build more in the same areas, of course, because the rich white neighborhoods are not going to let them put their industrial plants out there. Yeah. So they're like, yeah, keep it out there with the Black folks, the brown folks, the poor folks, because that environmental impact is worth it to them because our lives don't hold any value to them. And so that just points to the bigger issue that is, people can decide what value our lives have and do what they need to do. So, because at the end of the day, they just see green money. So why would I ever cut off my money supply to protect these Black folks? So
yeah, not only that, like it's like, I also know that I have power to maintain people working here because I know there's not many other options in these communities, right? And so the way that capitalism is designed is to, keep you healthy enough so you can work, sick enough that you're reliant upon us, right? And so
absolutely,
because you got this job, so you got to keep your health insurance because you got that tumor,
right? Because 1 out of 215 of y'all
gonna get something,
get cancer. So it's wicked. It's cyclical.
Yeah.
It's really sad. But also, I'll give a shout out to Change Happens in Houston, one of our partners on our Good Down There campaign, who are doing a lot of this cancer advocacy and screening work in the community, trying to get folks the help that they need.
Yeah, they were actually the first ones to kind of like bring the cancer belt and these different cancer clusters to our attention. So shout out to Change Happens.
No, they're an awesome organization. They do a lot of good work. No, this issue is like so like
layered.
So layered. I'm over here just like letting it all sink in. But like I was thinking about like gentrification and how like that's a major risk factor because you start pushing people out of neighborhoods, nice neighborhoods where they have more access to public transportation and to get to services, to go to the doctor or get healthy foods if they need to get on a train to like go to a better store than the one that might be up the street. Like a lot of those kinds of things obviously are concentrated in major cities. But then once Black people can't afford to live in those major cities, they get pushed out to areas that are cancer belts, basically, So it's like disappearing a population and disappearing like a problem for privileged people. But then other people are like really, really dealing with it. And then I was thinking about Handmaid's Tale. If y'all watch Handmaid's Tale, it's that one like part like where they're like in that like polluted field that they work in.
Like, what's it called?
That's what it was giving. Like,
yeah. I know what you're talking
I
about.
haven't seen it.
Okay.
I forget what they call it, but it's like the real bad women get sent there.
Yeah, it was
like a punishment.
It was a punishment. You got sent to like do some work in a polluted field, and everybody was getting sick as hell. It was horrible
because it was like just super. It was like fallout from like a bomb or something. So it was like hella radiation and just all types of terrible shit. But yeah, pretty much the same thing.
That's what was given. Yeah,
we gonna employ you in this plant. You gotta live here. Your kids gonna go to school here. Like they were just even talking about like the amount of children that have like asthma and like eczema and like different types of conditions like that because of where the proximity to these plants. So yeah, man. And then with gentrification, communities will complain about certain things and then they'll be like, no, we're not gonna do that for y'all. But then gentrification comes along and they literally do everything that the community been asking for and then push them out. Like, oh, we fixed it, but y'all can't live here no more. That's some bullshit.
Yeah, so I wanted to hear from our doctor in training,
Dr. Deej.
Dr. Deej, to really break it down for us. Kind of like, obviously we've been talking about it already, but like, just like, what are you seeing as like in this topic, this overarching issue of cancer rates rising for people under 50? Like, what do Black people really need to be thinking about, like with that? Like, what does this mean for us? What should our concerns be? What do we need to particularly be advocating and agitating around with this issue?
Yeah. So, and we've been talking about some of the examples of racism and racial capitalism throughout this conversation. But so like all of the rising cancer rates we've been talking about all impact Black communities more, like across the board, across like every type of cancer you look at. There's going to be disparities in outcomes, disparities in our access and quality of care. And that all boils down to racism and racial capitalism. And it's really a systemic issue across time, historically and contemporarily. We see it across levels. So Matthew, you and Mercy, y'all both talked about social determinants of health, which are related to the conditions where we live, work, and play, and age, and are born, and how those impact our health. And so Black folks, like you mentioned, Matthew, are more likely to be exposed to environmental stressors, environmental racism, and less likely to have access to health promoting resources in our neighborhoods. So living in food swamps, like you mentioned, and not having fresh green spaces, more likely to live near. I've been learning more about like noise pollution and just like single occupancy vehicles and how bad those are like for your health. And Paula, you had mentioned like how with gentrification we're getting pushed out of places that have kind of healthier transportation options. So those macro level forces are all impacting our health. But we also see how racism impacts us at like the institutional level and at that like healthcare level. And a lot of folks, like when they hear like medical racism, scientific racism, they may think of like Henrietta Lacks, or they may think of Tuskegee syphilis trial, but there's so many examples of how that shows up in our present day. And we definitely see that across the cancer continuum of care. So Paul, you had mentioned like even before the step of prevention, like getting us into clinical trials, and how Black folks are less likely to be in clinical trials because of just centuries of medical scientific racism and like the inherent untrustworthiness of scientific health institutions, making us less likely, understandably, to want to engage in that space. I mean, you also mentioned health insurance as well. From like the prevention side, so having due to racism, having less access to those like early detection mechanisms, the cancer screening, having less access to like health information around cancer. So knowing like, how important like understanding our family history is, and understanding like different risk factors, understanding symptoms, and when to initiate getting into care. And then once we're in care, I know, Matthew, we had been on a project where we like the data showed that Black people, when we do get a positive diagnosis, we do get screening, there's a longer wait time for us to actually get into treatment. And that, like, once you get a positive diagnosis, like, it's so critical to get into treatment, especially with something like colorectal cancer that is 90% treatable if it's caught early. So we see a disparity in us even being able to get into treatment. And lots of that has to do with like health insurance, uninsurance, underinsurance. We've heard several like personal cases of folks who are younger and, you know, are having symptoms and try to go to the doctor to get a colonoscopy or to get some cancer screening. And, you know, the provider denies them. We know that's kind of tied to health insurance and coverage, but there's lots of examples of that. And then, you know, once we're diagnosed and we're in care, we get a lot of those like quality issues related to provider bias and having less access to high quality health systems. In Georgia, we have like one of the highest rates of rural hospital closures. And so, yeah, exactly. So there's so many examples, like both from that like structural, like political, social conditions we live in, and once we start to engage in the cancer continuum of care, that Black folks experience disparities due to racism. I think in terms of what can be done about it, Matthew, I know you mentioned like a wicked problem, like racism as a wicked problem, which is a concept that we talk about a lot and comes from Dr. Heather Kame and Derek Griffith, that explain how, you know, racism as like an enduring problem that's been ingrained across time, across levels, really requires like complex solutions. Exactly. It's not a single like, oh, like eat healthy. Yeah. Right. Like y'all need to eat healthy.
More broccoli.
Exactly. Like it really needs to be like, and we're not, you know, we're in public health. We're not trying to talk down on like individual behavioral health change strategies, but those are one thing that can be done. And like Matthew mentioned, like there's so many contextual factors at the macro level that need to be addressed for those individual changes, the behavioral level to happen. So yeah, we really advocate for those multi-level changes, macro level changes in our social conditions across our life course from before we're born. Like that's like our cancer risk like starts happening like neonatal. So across the life course, focusing, you know, even when we do focus on policy and those macro level forces, not just focusing on like healthcare policy. So not just focusing on, you know, having more hospitals, very quality hospitals, like health insurance, which are also important, but also all those social policies that overlap with our health outcomes. But yeah, like we have so many like great partners that we've been working with, and we know there are organizations out there at the community level, advocacy groups and individuals, people with lived experiences with cancer that are actively advocating and trying to push the conversation forward and push policies and interventions forward to really improve our cancer outcomes.
Absolutely.
Man.
This is why she's going. This is why you're gonna have the credentials, because you just like educated us down. Like
Dr. Deej be spitting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important that, you know, as you mentioned, our solutions have to be multifactorial. They have to be multi-sectoral as well. You know, as you were talking, I was just thinking about why clinical guidance for colorectal cancer in particular, but thinking across all cancers, hasn't been, and maybe just all health outcomes in general, isn't race specific, given that Black people just exist in different contexts. Poor people just exist in different contexts across the country, right? And like, it would, something that I've also been thinking about is, how we center people who have the most risk. And I think our policies should really be baseline at who has the highest risk, right? And so like if Black people are seeing higher rates of cancer, in their 30s, then like screening for all people may need to start in their 30s. Yeah. But at minimum, I think the guidance should be separated for people who are at a higher risk. And right now the guidance is for people who are at a normal risk.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And not for people who may be at a higher risk. And if you have a higher risk, you're just like, now what? I have to trust my doctor who doesn't really know me. I have to trust all of these other institutions who weren't built to actually support people who look like me. And so, that may be something that we want to get more into is looking at clinical guidance and clinical policy and reimbursements, and how people get reimbursed for those procedures as well as a means of intervention.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, multifactorial problems gonna take multifactorial solutions. So,
and time and money. So donate to Black Health.
Plenty money.
You said it so aggressively too.
www.blackhealth.com/donate. Thank you. Well, this was a great discussion, guys.
Yeah, it was good.
I'm glad all of us are in the same room again.
Yeah.
It gives me the warm and fuzzies.
Welcome back, Paula.
Thanks. It was a long journey. My plane went from Johannesburg in South Africa to Cape Town. So that was like 2 hours. Then it went so people got off and on in Cape Town. And then the lady who got on next to me was very annoying. She like fell asleep. Like, so, okay, we had like a 3-person row, but like no one was in the middle. So I'm in the window, she on the aisle. I'm like, great, good, you can be over there. And then she like kind of immediately started putting stuff in the middle seat. Like, who gave you dominion over the middle seat? Like, I'm also here, and I was here before you actually because I got on in Johannesburg. And so she started putting stuff in the middle seat, and then so she was already annoying me. I knew she was about to start getting on my nerves. And then, of course, we go from Cape Town to San Juan, Puerto Rico. I don't know. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so in that flight, then she started like going to sleep. And then like at one point she was sleeping this way in the middle seat. Oh. So she's right here next to me now. Oh. Her head was next to me.
In your lap.
No, actually she started the other way. So she started with her feet. So then I was already kind of like, you don't get your white feet.
She was barefoot?
She wasn't barefoot. She had her shoes on, but even still,
I'm like,
even almost worse, right? Yeah. I just don't get your whole foot, whatever's on it, away from me. Yeah. Like, so she got her feet on the seat, like right here. She did kick me one time.
Absolutely not.
And then I think she saw I kind of got mad or something because I think I kind of hit her back. And then she flipped over and then had her head there. So now it was like she was cuddling me like she was my baby or something. Like, why is your head
in your
right
lap
here? Like, look at Matthew's face.
I'm just trying to figure out the size of this person. Like, how did they? How did she fit in the seat?
She was like crunched up, like in a fetal position, but like had her pillows kind of leaned up again. I was like,
she
girl,
brought pillows too?
No, like the pillows that they give you,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But somehow she had like 4 of them, so she was still in pillows.
She was hoarding pillows.
She took the middle seat pillow.
Yeah. So she was just all over the place. Her pillows was falling, and I was like, you know what? Like, you're like ruining the whole experience of not having someone in the middle seat. Because now you're doing the most in both seats.
In both seats,
right. You 2 seats wide at this point.
I wish I had someone to separate us.
That's what I was thinking. Matthew, I was like, actually, I wish there was somebody sitting here.
Because at least it would just be like stationary.
Yeah. So then we have to go to Puerto Rico to gas up the plane again or whatever. Apparently they can't, like, there's a direct Johannesburg to Atlanta. So I'm like, what is this plane that needs to stop for gas in Puerto Rico? And so then we were there for like 4 hours.
Y'all had to stay on the plane?
Yeah. And people were starting to get so disgruntled. Like, people were like, let me out of here. It was like getting crazy. Like people were starting to like already planning the revolt. Like niggas was forming like Like, okay, we need to talk about this. And even like the flight attendants, like the staff, like they were like very upset too. Like they had no answers for us. They were also kind of like imprisoned on the plane like the rest of us. It was getting real crazy. Like they was having to bring people water. Like niggas was mad. Jeez. And then we finally came to Atlanta, which was a 3.5-hour flight. So it was just such a journey. I'm like, please, I hope that don't happen to y'all flight. Because I thought I did book the direct, and somehow they started adding all other types of stuff up in there. Yeah. So
the way my anxiety set up, like it's gonna have to be straight through. Because once I take that Xanax, baby, it's a wrap. You don't sleep. I ain't waking up.
We just won't wake you up when we land.
No, you better wake me up when we land.
No, if we land somewhere we're not supposed to land, just let Mercy sleep.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, I get a good 12 hours.
Speaking of, though, we have an event we're planning in South Africa.
Excited.
29th of April, we're having the Link Up Johannesburg event. So it's coming together. I'm very, very excited. The whole team is going to come to Johannesburg. So that'll be awesome. Yay. Very, very fun times. So yeah, we're going to have a great event, like connecting people to health services in Johannesburg. Musical guest, all of my faves from South Africa. You know, I hit them up. They're going to be a part. We're gonna, like, great DJ set list. And of course, like mobile clinics. We're going to have a spiritual hygiene workshop, yoga. Yeah, so it's going to be really, really fun. Food trucks.
Lit.
Yeah, it's going to be very lit. So that's happening in April. So stay tuned for your tickets if you're out there and can make it. Or
if you're
here and you can make it.
Oh, I mean that's what I'm saying. If you get out there and can make it. Pull up, absolutely. And or the content that comes out from it, you know, engage with that and just support us and what we're doing in South Africa.
You can also donate to help us pay for it.
We could use that.
We are providing free services to the community.
Yeah.
You know, that costs money.
And we have a very engaged audience in South Africa. Like, people really fuck with us out there. So, yeah.
I love the love. Yeah, April is a busy month for us. So we're also hosting 2 events in Georgia. April 15th, we'll be in Atlanta. And then April 22nd, we'll be in Augusta, Georgia, hosting some great events around lung cancer, talking about prevention, treatment, screenings, testing, disparities, racism, all that great stuff with our partners, Amgen. So shout out to them and shout out to us. Yeah. And Matthew, do you want to tell us more about your little event at the White House?
Sure. I was invited to the White House to speak about colorectal cancer disparities. I got to be on a panel with Dr. Fola May, who was our advisor. And yeah, really just hitting on a lot of the things that we talked about today, right? The importance of tailoring interventions for Black folks, ensuring that the community is involved in not only identifying the problem, but also talking about how we get to a solution and get to problem solving. But really just, it was a great opportunity to build the Black Health brand. I met some key partners that I'm excited to follow up with. A lot of movers and shakers, working in the colorectal cancer space. And I think even more importantly, folks personally impacted by colorectal cancer. Chadwick's wife, Simone, was there and gave a really compelling speech. We can link you all to the video of that. But really just how urgent this problem is, how it impacts people, and, really thinking through how we can mobilize all of these different partners to get things done. So we'll link the video to it. You can watch me talk about racism, as I love to do, and watch the rest of, the folks working around the colorectal cancer space talk about their work. So very exciting.
Yay. Very cool.
We'll put the link in the notes.
Well, thank y'all so much for tuning in with us. Make sure you tap in for our events. Visit us, www.blkhlth.com. That is on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We got a TikTok now, LinkedIn, whatever social media platform we on there, we got it. Okay. So make sure you follow and drop us a note in the comments. Let us know what you think. What topics do you want us to talk about? And we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
See y'all.